The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience. Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, continuing our early dive into 2018 fantasy football rankings. We got all the shows banked for you for Rankings Week. We got quarterbacks with Al Smiz. We got running backs with Mike Clay. And today, wide receiver rankings with Rich Hribar of Roto World. What's going on, my man?
Pat, man, it's great to catch up with you. I've only met you briefly a few years ago for about, 30 seconds in Las Vegas. We haven't really had a chance to talk. So when you reached out to me, I was excited to get to do something with you finally for the first time.
And I'm probably far more sober now than I was then.
I mean, you were pretty loose, but I mean, we were on that stage where nothing was going to injure us at that moment.
See, that's perfect. No one remembers the shenanigans I was getting up to because everyone was a bit hazy. That's exactly how I like it. So before we get into everything, just want to let everyone know, give the episode a like. It goes a long way to keeping everything free. My rankings will come out around, I was going to say Canada Day or America Day or whatever the hell you guys call that down there, July 4th. Somewhere around that weekend, boom, top 300 rankings, probably the worst rankings you'll ever see on the internet. That's why I need to bring on the people that actually know what they're talking about. So wide receivers today, Rich, are these standard half point or PPR rankings?
I live in a PPR world. I'm writing the draft guide now for Roto World, the tiers write-up. I do that every year for every position, and we live in a PPR format there. So, I mean, I kind of just go live off PPR. I do, however, when I do my tiers, I kind of group them by how players score anyways. You can find that kind of like I've tweeted out my wide receiver tiers already and have that pinned to my profile. I tend to group guys by how they score their fantasy points and kind of put them in buckets. So, I mean, these are going to be in a PPR order for like a rankings thing, but like for tiers, I'm more looking at how guys score their points and based on the kind of volume they get, kind of how I go off of segregating players there.
So for overall draft strategy heading into the season, I've discussed this with a few people. It does seem like it's going to be running back very heavy in the first round and maybe in the first few rounds because people tried that zero RB. They didn't like it so much when the running backs, at least elite running backs, started scoring all the points and guys like Odell Beckham go down. Julio underperforms in the touchdown department and everyone hates his guts from this point on. Mike Evans a disappointment last year. Des Bryant, Jordy Nelson. Bad year for receivers at the top end if you really reach, but is now the time to swing back and just start loading up on receivers again?
I mean, you can always zig when they zag. I mean, if a format draft strategy like zero RB is pretty contingent on format, though. You need to have full PPR. You need to have 3 starting wide receivers plus flex spots, to kind of really get that to go off without a hitch there. That's because you're building up for more variance at the position. You're allotting the most amount of roster capital you need to the position you need the most. So that's why zero RB works in a situation like that, even when you can have some guys fail. But, I mean, yeah, there's no doubting that this year's going to be way more running back heavy. I mean, you look at last year, especially because we tend to rankings and how everyone approaches the draft tends to just follow what happened last year. Kind of always. We might have a few players slip in, like an Amari Cooper. People will be like, oh yeah, well he'll just bounce back. He was that bad, he won't be again. But usually everything tends to follow what last year kind of did. And last year was a big running back year. It was a running back receiving year. I mean, running backs had their most amount of targets, receptions, and receiving yards as a position that they had any year in NFL history. When passing was way down in the NFL in totality, but that passing to running backs was sky high. So, I mean, you're getting those guys, the David Johnsons, the Le'Veon Bells. David Johnson wasn't even active last year, but, Todd Gurley made a big receiving jump. Even guys like Mark Ingram are catching 50 passes, in a season. So, I mean, anytime you have that kind of receiving output go to the running back position, it's making all those guys' floor so much better. And that's why running back was able to just dominate receiver last year. We should see it switch back a little bit with the QB injuries, kind of recoiling a bit. I mean, we'll get Rodgers back. We might get Andrew Luck back. Who really knows at this point? I saw him picking up kids, but he wasn't throwing them, so I can't really trust, whether or not he's going to be back or not. But, QB injuries were bad last year. NFL was down 807 pass attempts last year than the year before. So, I mean, we'll see if that recoils a bit as well. But yeah, definitely people are going to be pushed off the wide receivers, but you can still get on those guys, especially at the turn this year. I mean, anytime you can get a Julio Jones paired with a Michael Thomas or an Odell Beckham paired with one of those guys and start your team off that way instead of reaching on a running back after they've all been pillaged, the first 8 picks, that's not a bad way to start your team either.
All right, well, let's get right into your rankings then. The top 10 in terms of PPR right now in May, heading in to the 2018 season. Antonio Brown comes in at number 1 on your list. He's followed by OBJ, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Davante Adams, and Doug Baldwin. Now, you had mentioned you would split these into tiers. You can find that up on your Twitter page at Lord Reeves. But in your tiers, you have one guy to rule them all. He is the king.
Yes.
He is Antonio Brown. Once again, he averaged the most points of any receiver per game last season, just a hair above DeAndre Hopkins. So I would actually have Hopkins and Brown as my, Brown, then Hopkins as my 1-2, and I would think that they would be in this spot by themselves. But you're a bit more down on DeAndre Hopkins here. What separates Antonio Brown from the rest of this pack besides the consistency, or is that what we're banking on here?
Yeah, I mean, the consistency on a full season scale, what you've had from Antonio Brown, where Hopkins has kind of shown us a floor. I mean, Hopkins' season, this past year, it's kind of eerily similar to how his 2015 season was, where he was just jammed targets over and over, on a team that was basically subpar. I mean, there are some splits that we can delve into when Deshaun Watson played, but in totality, I mean, he had 33.7% of the Houston targets. That was the highest rate since Brandon Marshall's had since 2012. Pretty slim to roll that over. I mean, there's been 40 receivers in NFL history since targets have been tracked since 1992 that have had 170 or more targets, and just 5 of those guys have had their targets go up the next year. So we have to anticipate a little bit of volume loss for DeAndre Hopkins just naturally because it was situational how he got those targets. Now he can offset some of that target loss with some improved efficiency, and he was far more efficient with Deshaun Watson last year. He caught 62% of his targets with Deshaun Watson in those 6.5 games. So, I mean, I'm just looking at it from a volume loss compared to Antonio Brown, who's a guy who's been the PPR wide receiver 1 in 4 of the past 5 years. The only other guy to have a run like that has been Jerry Rice. He's kind of our more modern day Jerry Rice. So I'm just looking at the totality of what is more stable year to year, and it's Antonio Brown. I think it separates him, where Hopkins, I think, comes more to like the pack of the higher wide receiver ones. Those, like I said, those Odells, the Julio group, those guys. But Antonio's still the king for me.
So is Antonio Brown in the discussion for the first overall pick? Like, is there any chance that you would ever take him above Todd Gurley, above Le'Veon Bell, or even above David Johnson in the situation? Because I think there's a compelling case to be made, because the first overall pick doesn't need to be the first overall score by the end of the year. They just need to be basically somewhere inside the top 10, top 5. And the one guy that you can kind of pencil in for that every single year is Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think there's a good argument. We talked about, if you're in a full PPR league and you're going to go wide receiver heavy approach, you can't take a better wide receiver than him. And, coming back to the turn, this year there's a bunch of guys that if you're going to go that heavy, you can get a Mike Evans at that 2-3 turn. You can get, a player that is really, you could start stacking on a position, have a really big hammer every week. And we also know it's harder to be the RB1 year over year than it is the wide receiver 1. RB1s tend to have a bigger drop off than wide receiver ones at the top of the position, through injuries and just play. And a lot of running backs are driven by, touchdown spikes in their careers that just aren't sustainable, because running backs score short touchdowns. And the only way you can score short touchdowns is by having, a lot of plays run in a certain segment of the field. And those don't tend to, roll over year over year, as stable as other wide receiver metrics. So a guy like Antonio Brown can be, absolutely. I mean, am I going to do it? Probably not often. I definitely, like I said, have to be full PPR. I'd have to have that flex spot where I want to go wide receiver. But I mean, he's definitely as stable as a fantasy commodity can come. He's basically the consensus 105 this year in drafts, and I can't remember there's ever been a consensus 105 as good as Antonio Brown since I've been playing, for over 20 years.
So who's the consensus 104? Is it Ezekiel Elliott?
I would think that, you'd have the 4 running backs more or less go. I mean, you might have a guy like David Johnson slip from a casual league just based on recency bias, him not being around last year. People that drafted him say, I'm not going to draft him again. Arizona's bad. Maybe he goes, 105 and he slides a little bit. Yeah, I think that Zeke would be the 4th guy there in running backs.
See, that's crazy to me. I would much prefer to have Antonio Brown than Ezekiel Elliott.
Same. I agree too. I was just spitting off consensus. What I see happen in drafts now is typically AB is the 105.
Okay, that blows my mind. I mean, hey, maybe I want to pick 5th then if I can guarantee that's going to happen to me, and give me some nice, instead of getting like the turn, I just might get a nice, decent wraparound there, see what's left on the table. But for me, DeAndre Hopkins would come in at number 2, and I agree with you that in terms of overall target volume, you're probably going to see that slip. But if Deshaun Watson theoretically plays 16 games, I think that he has the chance to either duplicate or even potentially improve on the efficiency and the numbers that he put up last season, even if it comes on fewer targets. So I'm willing to take that gamble. And really in that division, the only team that scares me on defense is going to be Jacksonville, and DeAndre Hopkins was even able to manage those waters pretty well last season too. And it's not like people are coming in to steal his targets away. Like, yeah, a full season of Will Fuller, which granted never happens, isn't going to lead to like 13 targets a game for Will Fuller. No more CJ Fedorowicz. So there is a path for him to see around like 30% again. Maybe not 33%, maybe 28, 29, 30%. And I think that would be an elite quality. So I would have him at number 2. But these next 3 are really, you can kind of mix and match them any way you want to. You have Odell at number 2, Julio at number 3, and Michael Thomas at number 4. I was surprised to see Michael Thomas ahead of DeAndre Hopkins on a full-point PPR list, although I probably shouldn't be looking at his numbers from last season. But Julio Jones is really the contentious one here, that there's been a lot of debate about him all over them interwebs. People have real hot takes on Julio Jones when it really boils down to it. You know what I heard? He can't score touchdowns. Now, some people will say, hey, touchdowns are widely there's a lot of variance baked in with touchdown scoring. So, maybe this year he'll score 14, maybe he'll score 8, and then all of a sudden, when you look at 4 consecutive years of 1,400 yards, it looks a whole lot better in terms of overall scoring. You have the floor with Julio Jones. But is there an argument that maybe Atlanta just runs the ball in the red zone, doesn't throw to Julio because that's what they're good at?
Well, last year they tried. He did his 3 touchdowns definitely weren't for a lack of trying. He doubled his red zone targets last year than he had the year before. He just caught 27% of his red zone targets. For his career, he had converted on 55% of his red zone targets for at least receptions. So, I mean, they were trying to get him the football. It just didn't really work out. And, that might be a byproduct of them forcing the ball to the situations they weren't. Some of the targets just might not have been catchable. Sometimes these end zone targets register as a target, but they're kind of throwaways. They aren't really catchable balls to begin with. So, I mean, but overall in totality, when you look back at it, they did try. I mean, but even if he's an Andre Johnson-ish type of player and just isn't going to give us that 12 to 15 touchdown season, being that 6 to 8 touchdown guy still goes a long way with the kind of floor he's had. I mean, he's had 1,400 more receiving yards in each of the past 4 seasons. That's something only Marvin Harrison has done. He's had over 16 yards per catch the past 2 seasons on over 80 catches. That's something just Torrey Holt and Calvin Johnson have done in their careers in back-to-back years. He's just so stable as being a high target, high yardage, type of guy that eventually you might run into some touchdowns. And if you just get his 6 to 8 that you're saying for his career, I mean, that's making last year's season look a lot different than it did. I understand he didn't live up to ADP. He was more of a floor player, didn't have those ceiling weeks last week. Or week to week that you're typically getting with a guy like Julio Jones, but you can't live in that world. You can't let last year's kind of not getting those touchdowns in those big ceiling games. He just had the one, kind of inflect what you're going to do this year. He's still a top 5 guy, kind of set and forget. Start your team off them, you're fine. Receiving option.
Well, in 12-team leagues, and again, we really haven't hit the part of the season where a lot of casual players are doing their fantasy football drafts, but based on what I'm seeing so far, he's going at like pick 13, 14, 15 overall. So he's one of those swing players that you talk about, like an ideal start if you were just to kind of punt running back to begin with. Let's just say that's something that you want to do, and you had picked 12 in a draft. You could theoretically get Julio Jones, potentially Odell Beckham, maybe Michael Thomas as your 1-2. Like, that's a pretty solid start.
Yeah, and you get a lot of opportunities to split the baby there, and guys like Melvin Gordon go at the turn. You don't have to love Melvin Gordon, but to pair a guy like Melvin Gordon with a guy like Julio Jones, those type of volume players, you typically in years past in fantasy football haven't been able to pair that type of volume that early in the draft. Usually if you're getting a running back that can push, 270 touches, you're not getting a wide receiver that can push 150 targets. You're able to do both this year, kind of the turn. Kind of my favorite spot. I mean, I understand like those top 4 running backs we talked about, like have been like really popular. You want to have one of those guys because they do the rushing and the receiving. But I mean, starting at the turn, and the top 15-ish type players are as deep as they've been for a year as I can remember. So saying I'm going to get 2 of those guys and guarantee myself 2 of those is a nice start as well.
All right, so Odell Beckham comes in at number 2 in the rankings. I'm guessing no residual injury, none of the drama that surrounds OBJ in New York. And I guess Barkley helps him out a little bit, doesn't it? It alleviates some of that pressure?
Yeah, I mean, Odell's just one of those guys that his ceiling has just been so enormous, the displayed measured ceiling. And last year, he was the guy that got better every game of the season last year before his injury. And, his best game of the year looks like he was having it against the Chargers, against Casey Hayward, when he had that real bad ankle injury. He's basically been worth, 0.8 touchdowns, almost a full touchdown per game he's played. It's hard to ignore that type of scoring ability. Being one of the safest bets on the board to push double-digit touchdowns. And then he comes with those just big plays. He's the type of guy that has, the 40 yards through 3 quarters, and then, houses a 70-yard slant, and then turns a 40-yard game into a 200-yard game in the blink of an eye. He's just that type of player. Still young, right in the apex of his career. Going to be force-fed targets. I mean, he still doesn't have much to contend with there. Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram, really, Barkley out of the backfield. It's going to be funneled still through him. So, I mean, he's kind of another guy just set and forget. We don't really need to, like I said, really poke and prod at these guys too much. These guys are going to be guys that you're going to feel really good about starting your receiving unit off with.
Well, I guess the last one then at number 4, Michael Thomas. Is this sort of ranking of Michael Thomas at number 4 a lot like the Julio, where he had 5 touchdowns last year? Like, he should really have a lot more than that. You would think he had 9 in his rookie season. And you look at the target numbers, you look at the reception numbers, up over 100. No Mark Ingram for the first 4 games of the season. It was funny, when you were talking about starting Michael Thomas in DraftKings every week. But great cash game player, and then people would just be furious about his GPP upside because he'd be the classic 8 for 88 every week. However, in PPR formats, that's fantastic every single week.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Thomas, he's one of my favorite guys this year because I feel like he's going under the radar because some people feel that owned him last year feel like he wasn't as good as his numbers suggest. I mean, he was 3rd in the NFL interceptions, had 104 catches. But that was on a team that was 20th in, overall, passing, in passing plays run during the season. Think about that. And then this is a team that's going to have a lot of passing game recoil now. They were 20th in passing. They had a 53%. They led for 53% of their plays last year, the New Orleans Saints. Of teams the past decade to do that, the loss is 11.3% led the following year. The Saints were a team that were 10th in the league in rushing rate a year ago, but if you look at the neutral game script, they were 20th in rushing rate when the game was within 1 score. So they stacked on a lot of that rushing volume, when the game was out of hand. You think that game like the Bills, where they just basically ran. Didn't they run for almost 30 straight plays against the Bills that one game? It was something bananas. So, I mean, you're going to get a big, return spike on the Saints passing game in terms of volume. And he's still the only guy. They added a 38-year-old Ben Watson, and they added Cameron Meredith off of an injury that was similar to the injury Navarro Bowman had a few years ago. I like Cameron Meredith and the upside he presents, for what you can get him in drafts. But, I mean, he's still an unknown commodity in terms of, are we going to get a fully healthy Cameron Meredith back, and what type of player are we going to get back in return? So, I mean, yeah, Michael Thomas is the guy. I think he's a guy, a dark horse to lead the league in receptions. If he had 104 in a year where the team was 20th in the league in passing attempts, he can get, guy could push 115, 120 in that type of situation if it bounces back. So, I mean, and we know the TDs are going to bounce back too, because the Saints had a dead even split of rushing and passing touchdowns. There have been 28 teams to do that the past decade. The average increase of passing touchdowns for those teams the following year has been 5.1. Breeze is going to be a bounce back. Love Drew Brees this year where he's at. And I mean, Michael Thomas, those guys, he should probably double his, touchdowns, get to the 8-9 range again.
All right, the final 2 members of this second tier that you have listed right now, AJ Green and Keenan Allen. Are you worried that time is running out for AJ Green? Because last year was not a great year. That was a bad year for the Bengals overall, granted. But he hadn't had a season where he played 16 games, really, that was this bad since his rookie season. It was a precipitous drop-off. The touchdowns were still there with 8. 75 catches is nice. It just seems to me like you're paying for a floor for AJ Green where upside may not exist anymore. And I think Keenan Allen's kind of the same way, yet Keenan Allen week to week to week to week tends to be more consistent than AJ Green does.
Yeah, Green is interesting. You hit on it. He had his lowest receptions total per game and his lowest yardage totals per game, since his rookie season. That dip was kind of masked by the touchdowns that you said. He had the touchdown spike, which you knew he was going to have because he had a really low touchdown rate the year prior, that the year he got injured. But when you look at it, he had by far his lowest rate of catchable passes last year. Just 52% of his receptions were catchable last year. He had averaged 68% for his career prior. So, I mean, I think when you tie into the kind of offensive line the Bengals had last year, you could see where a lot of that, that kind of syncs up. A lot of Andy Dalton's not the type of player we want to have throwing a lot of passes under pressure. He's not a guy because we know he's been trouble for AJ Green before, just when he's been good, when Andy Dalton's been at his best, he always been able to sync up with AJ Green. So, I mean, I think you'll see that bounce back, catchable target rate bounce back. So that will improve some of the floor reception totals, the floor yard totals will naturally rise based on that. But I mean, there's no denying that we're approaching, the apex here of AJ Green, hitting that age 30 season this year. This July, he'll be turning 30. So, I mean, we might see a continued downtrend. But he's another guy like we talk about with Hopkins. Like, he's just going to command such a large target share of that Bengals passing game. There's just no good receivers outside of him. Eifert's going to be back to maybe to shave down some touchdowns, but, Eifert can't be trusted to play a full season at this point. John Ross, Brandon LaFell. I mean, he's going to get so many targets. It's just hard to ignore, that type of value for a player that's had already such a high floor and a good ceiling that you want to latch onto.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the injuries, I think that Keenan Allen would be regarded in almost similar terms and potentially on the upswing versus AJ Green, but I can see why they're back-to-back in the lower part of that tier. The next little drop down, we have Mike Evans, Davante Adams, Doug Baldwin, Larry Fitzgerald, Stefon Diggs, Adam Thielen. I think I would elevate Doug Baldwin into that AJ Green tier. Like, I don't understand, like, even just looking at his average ADP right now. In PPR leagues, Doug Baldwin is the 31st pick overall. Seattle sucks this year, right? Like, they lost their defense. They're going to have to throw the entire time. Yeah, just because they drafted a running back doesn't mean they're going to be effective running the ball. They probably won't pass quite as much as they did last season, but they also lost some members of the receiving game as well. So when you don't have Paul Richardson around anymore, P. Rich to suck away some of these touchdown looks, it just seems like Doug Baldwin's going to be a lock for a very good floor in targets, a very good floor in receptions, and he always scores touchdowns. He's like their guy in the red zone.
Yeah, I love Doug Baldwin this year in that third round, and sometimes he makes it to the fourth where he's just an auto pick if he hits there. You kind of talked about last year was kind of interesting. I mean, his efficiency kind of took a hit a little bit last year. When you look at it, it's kind of surprising, or it's not really surprising his efficiency take dip because Russell Wilson, although he led the league in fantasy points, he was the QB1. If you look at Russell Wilson's efficiency, he kind of dropped in everywhere outside of touchdown rate. So, I mean, seeing Baldwin drop a little bit, it's not that big a deal. Also, Baldwin, his average up the target went really high last year. He had a really big spike. He was 13.4 yards last year. That was coming off of a season where he had a career low 8.8 yards averaged up the target. And you talk about they lost Jimmy Graham, no Paul Richardson. There's 176 missing targets. They have only added Jerron Brown in free agency. So, I mean, who are we really thinking? And they added Ed Dixon to replace, Jimmy Graham. So, I mean, where are these targets going? I mean, Tyler Lockett's not a guy that you're going to really, funnel a big spike towards. So, I mean, Doug Baldwin has a chance to really, set his career high of targets, which was only 125 to begin with. That's his career high in targets. He could really get a guy and get like the 140 range if Seattle really takes a step back defensively like we might expect, and they have to get a little more pass heavy like we might expect.
Yeah, I would go Baldwin over Adams and over Mike Evans solely because he has no one to really split targets with. And you mentioned the Jimmy Graham thing. That's one of the hesitations that I would have with Davante Adams. Like if we're going to list some pros and list some cons. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is great. It's great to have. And we know that Davante Adams catches a bunch of touchdowns and is now the wide receiver one on this team. But you insert Jimmy Graham into that situation, just look what happened to Doug Baldwin. All of a sudden, you're just throwing it to Jimmy Graham every time you get into the red zone. Obviously, your touchdown numbers are going to be affected by that. Without Jimmy Graham, you think that Baldwin sees a bit of an uptick, and you think that Davante Adams may just regress a little bit. He's still going to get his catches, his yards, and his touchdowns. It just might not be the peak of what we're looking for in overall scoring. And I just kind of feel the same way about Evans. Evans is going to score, but there are so many pass catchers on that team now that 2 years ago, it was great when he was the only show in town. Now they have enough bodies that I don't know what his target level is going to be like every single week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of pushback if you any guys in this area over to separate any of these guys. They're all kind of guys, like I said, they're kind of in a similar bucket for me tier wise. Mostly just like the touchdown upside, I think. for all three of these guys is so high. That's why you like them. They all play with good quarterbacks, outside of what you feel about Jameis Winston. But with Rodgers and Wilson, you feel good about the touchdowns being stable. Evans is, Evans, when you look at his career, he's kind of bounced around year to year. He's had a 12 touchdown season, then a 4 touchdown season, then a 12 touchdown season, then a 5 touchdown season. But I think playing with a fully healthy Jameis Winston this year, he'll have positive, touchdown regression. He's also a guy that, he had a big spike in targets inside the 10, but he only turned 1 into a touchdown last year. Like, that's something that'll correct itself when you have a receiver like Mike Evans.
Maybe, but if Jameis Winston's throwing the ball like 40 feet over everyone's head, even when you have 9'20" Mike Evans out there, it's not going to help.
Yeah, but I mean, he's one of those guys, one of those big body guys that is just going to have that cattywampus touchdown production where he's going to hit you with a big touchdown season, and like you said, the types of targets he gets, because he's not one of those roster smoothing type of guys. Like, he's not a guy that's going to probably ever be that 96 catch player he was 2 years ago, because he was in that DeAndre Hopkins situation we talked about where he just got all those targets. He was one of those 170 target players that was on that Hopkins list. Evans is probably one of those guys that is going to live in like that low, like 20 to 25% target range and be like a 75 catch player, because he gets most of his targets down the field and most like jump ball situations. I think that you're right in saying that. That's why I don't think elevates him the tier above, like whereas Evans was last year. Remember, we were regarding Evans in that tier above a year prior. But I don't think he's that type of player based on his targets being shaved down a little bit like they were from that 2016 season when they get a Deshaun Jackson, you've got a Chris Godwin, you add a tight end and O.J. Howard. They got Ronald Jones in the backfield this year. So, I mean, their only targets they lost last year from Doug Baldwin, or not Doug Martin, I should say. So, I mean, their whole team's coming back fully healthy. So it's not a lot of room for Evans to increase his target share. So he's going to be kind of one of those guys that's going to be a high yardage, live off of touchdowns type of guy, but not a guy that's going to get you, push those 96 catches he had 2 years ago.
So, like, when I build my draft strategy, I like to go with a lot of consistency at the top, points I can bank on every week. And you're going to need your Gronks or your potential Mike Evans breakout touchdown guy that just really overperforms where he is, and that's how you end up winning championships. But I just like to get to the playoffs and figure it out from there. And I do like to try to find whoever the new target monster is of the season, just being like, there's no one else to throw to. They have to throw to that guy. He's just going to see so many targets, he's going to turn that into fantasy points. I keep going back to it, but I just feel like Doug Baldwin has the potential to be that guy over all those guys this season. Like, I think that I'm just thinking about my rankings right now. Like, would I put Doug Baldwin above AJ Green? I might, but I'm also bad at ranking, so there could be something with that.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we're talking just like we're putting these guys in a linear list, you're always going to have like these little quabbles of this player versus that player. But I mean, that's why, tiers exist. And that's why we're looking more at like buckets of players, because fantasy football, if you're running it off of a linear list anyways, I mean, you're going to run into a lot of problems to begin with.
This is true. So at the last part of your tier, you have the TD betas list. Mike Evans, Davante Adams, Doug Baldwin. Allen Robinson's on that list. He's number 14 in your rankings. How do you think everything shakes out in Chicago? Because I think this is a very fascinating situation of how this offense is now going to run. It's going to be completely different. We don't even know if Mitch Trubisky's all that good. Potentially he could be. He has a really good receiver in Allen Robinson, but like, what do you think his target share ends up coming in at? Or does Trubisky default back into, I'm going to dump a lot off to Cohen, I'm going to use Trey Burton, I'm going to throw to my tight ends, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I still think it's going to be pretty high. I still think he's going to be a guy that at least is pushing that 25% target mark. I mean, the other guys, that if you look at the surrounding players, they're all kind of niche players. So they're all going to be not guys that come in a high target share, but they're going to be like they're guys that are mismatch problems. Cohen, a Trey Burton, a Taylor Gabriel, and you've got a rookie in Anthony Miller. So, I mean, the one guy you're going to consistently week to week funnel opportunity to outside of those guys is going to be Allen Robinson. I mean, he's still just 25 years old. I mean, like you talked about, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of transition he has going from Bortles to Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, because Robinson's been a guy that's been below average rate of wide receivers in terms of catchable targets per year of his career. So, I mean, is Mitch Trubisky guy is going to be a guy that can elevate him that? Are the targets going to be more efficient? We still don't really know. But we know that Robinson is also the archetype of player that has been able to turn in, like a Mike Evans, high yardage seasons, high yards per target, and has touchdown upside. He's also been one of those guys that's been really consistent with his targets, even attached to Blake Bortles, near the goal line. I mean, his inside the 10-yard line, he's turned almost 50% of his career targets into touchdowns. So, I mean, when the Bears get there, who are they throwing to? Who are these guys that you're pointing to that are red zone options? There's not a lot here. Maybe a Trey Burton, maybe an Adam Shaheen, but Taylor Gabriel's not going to be a threat in that area of the field. Tyreek Cohen's not going to be a threat in that area of the field in the passing game. Those targets are going to go to Allen Robinson. He's another guy I don't think he'll push like the 85, 90 receptions, but he's a guy that can turn those 75 catches into a 1,300-yard season and push double-digit touchdowns. So, I mean, he's a guy I'm still really excited on to get to where he is. He goes in the 4th round. I mean, I like having him in the 4th round a lot in a lot of leagues. Based kind of, I feel like that's fair for his floor and gives you room to hit on the ceiling for him.
Well, it's sort of a similar situation to what happened with Alshon Jeffrey last year, is that no one really wanted to pull the trigger on him in drafts because they didn't know what was going to happen with him in Philly. And if you had taken him, it turned out pretty good. And I can see the same thing happening with Allen Robinson, but the upside potentially is higher because there's, like you mentioned, there's not really a lot of guys on that team to steal much away from him. The one problem with him 2 years ago, at least, when he was being overdrafted and he had that season with Blake Bortles, they were deemed catchable balls. But if you watch a lot of these throws, it's like when you're playing Madden and you have a receiver that's like, 6 yards in front of you. You don't need to hold down X the entire time. It's like a half X. He throws a nice right into the breadbasket so you can hit a receiver in stride and you can run with it. Blake Bortles would honestly stand 3 feet away from Allen Robinson and fire it at his knees. And it'd be like, of course he didn't catch it. So I think those get counted as catchable targets. And I don't necessarily know if they were or not because Blake Bortles sucks so much. He did not help Allen Robinson whatsoever. We have this little mid-reception beta tier here, and at number 11 and number 12 and number 13, you have Fitzgerald, Stefon Diggs, and Adam Thielen. Now, Fitzgerald and Adam Thielen are speaking my language when it comes to a Pat Mayo-type receiver. Give me the targets, give me the reception base, I'll figure out the rest. And the great part about these guys, always undervalued. Someone ran a report of the last 3 years in terms of fantasy championship teams. Antonio Brown was the most common player on fantasy championship teams. Larry Fitzgerald was 3rd. Do you expect any sort of drop-off in his production this year? Because if they're bad and he's not playing well, there's a chance he might retire halfway through the season, which is actually kind of great news. Because if he sucks and you drafted Larry Fitzgerald and he doesn't retire, you're going to play Larry Fitzgerald every single week. But if he does retire and he sucks, you're just like, oh, great, I can just replace him and not feel bad about it. But can you almost just pencil him in for 100 catches?
Yeah, I think you can, again, when you look at just the way the team is shaped out. I mean, he's had 100 catches in each of the past 3 seasons. Only Jerry Rice has ever had a streak such that long, turning over 30, like Larry Fitzgerald. He's going to be 35 this year. I think if anything were to happen, it would just be age-related, like where he just doesn't really have it. But I mean, you look at the guys that they brought in, Sam Bradford and Josh Rosen, those are guys that are going to be getting him those high percentage targets still. And when you look at what he did last year, if you're going to say that this is just going to be a dumpster fire of a team and they turn to Rosen and he has the rookie lumps, it's just been terrible. I mean, Fitz was still really good with Drew Stanton and Blaine Gabbert last year. I mean, the 9 games he played last year, I mean, he displayed a high ceiling still. He had 16 or more PPR points in 4 of those 9 games. He's going to have that gaudy volume. I mean, they're just getting David Johnson back. They lost both the Brown brothers this year. They're replacing them with just Christian Kirk, who's kind of been a career slot player in college. And Bryce Butler, who everyone kind of still likes as an ancillary guy. But, I mean, it's going to be Fitz is going to get, 27 to 30% of the targets again this year. And they're high percentage targets. So we talked about it. His catch rate's going to be 65 to 70% because he's getting those near the line of scrimmage targets that he's been able to just manifest into, a high PPR floor. And no one still wants to draft him because everyone's waiting for just that age-clifted hit finally. And I'm not sure it's going to at this point.
Yeah, and they really brought in, you mentioned Rosen or Bradford, it doesn't really matter which one it is, that they seem perfectly geared to be the types of guys that throw to Larry Fitzgerald and the types of routes he runs too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I mean, you mentioned Christian Kirk. He might get too coked out on the field and, try to push Larry Fitzgerald away from the ball, not be able to follow the game plan. But if that happens, that's a consequence we'll deal with. You mentioned that people don't want to draft Larry Fitzgerald. Right now, in PPR drafts, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, he is the 17th wide receiver coming off the board. Some names ahead of him right now: Amari Cooper, Josh Gordon, Stefon Diggs, T.Y. Hilton, Tyreek Hill's in there. I think that for me, just the safety that comes along with Fitz would elevate him up that list just due to the volume of receptions that he's going to get. But you have both Thielen and Diggs right behind him. You have Diggs slightly ahead of Thielen. Would that depend on personal preference of what you want from a fantasy player potentially? potentially, because Thielen's going a bit higher, and he probably comes with a higher degree of safety, and we know he can break big plays. We see it all the time. But do we have it in the back of our minds that Diggs is still the higher upside player here?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you look at what the two did on the field together last year too, and you're able to separate that, it kind of makes me a little more interested in Diggs, and who also is a little cheaper. I mean, you look at Diggs, I mean, he's kind of given us these pockets over the first 3 years of being like that guy that could be the next elite receiver. And then he either gets injured or, his quarterback gets injured. Something happens to where this falls off. When you look at last year, he had 93 or more receiving yards in 3 of the opening 4 games. He had 4 touchdowns. He had a huge game the opening night. Had that monster game against the Bucs, And then, he kind of got hurt. He hurt his groin. Never was really the same the rest of the year. But he still did have a relatively safe floor. If you look at the 12 games him and Thielen played together where Diggs didn't come off the field or wasn't on the injury report, he was a wide receiver 28 or higher in 8 of those 12 games. Where Thielen was the wide receiver 29 or lower in 7 of those 12 games. Thielen was a lot more volatile. And that had a lot to do with, some touchdown production. Diggs had the 8 touchdowns, the 3 for Thielen. But, I mean, Diggs is one of those guys, I think when you just look at it, like I said, he showed that, like, elite receiver ceiling, whereas, like, Thielen has shown he has those high spike games, but then has these low floor games a lot as well, where Diggs really even last year didn't have those. He still had a relatively high floor. Like I said, he was churning out more wide receiver 28 and higher games, like that fringe wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 cusp, whereas Thielen was throwing a lot more of those wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 games into the mix that you were seeing. And also Thielen had his slot snaps reduced as the season wore on. He was a guy that started off playing a lot of snaps in the slot, then they started getting Jarvis Wright involved more. They brought in a guy like Kendall Wright this year, who we don't think Kendall Wright's not a threat to either of these guys, but he is going to push Thielen into strictly playing like a lot more flanker this year than playing in the slot like he did last year. So, I mean, I'm fine with both these guys. It's really hard, like I said, when you look at those 12 games they played together, in totality, overall, Diggs was wide receiver 9 and Thielen was wide receiver 10. So, I mean, if we want to cut through the variance and say who has a higher floor or whatever, I mean, it came out of the wash as right next to each other still. So, I mean, I'm fine with both these guys. And we even talked about them adding Kirk Cousins. You're adding Kirk Cousins. No matter how good you think Case Keenum was or how good you think he's moving forward, like Kirk Cousins is a clear upgrade and is going to make both of these players, extremely fantasy viable.
So on that tier, you have Larry Fitzgerald mixed in with Adam Thielen. And then you have high divers with volume. You have Stefon Diggs in that tier. Then you have Tyreek Hill. He's number 15. T.Y. Hilton, he's number 17. And Amari Cooper is number 16 in your rankings. Can I just cross Amari Cooper off my list? Every year, it will happen at some point during the preseason. It'll be like, this is the year. Amari Cooper is going to be a top 5 receiver. And then all of a sudden, he's being drafted like the end of the second round. I'm like, I don't want Amari Cooper there. This isn't going to work out. He's going to have 3 really awesome games and suck the rest of the time. I just can't. I don't know what it is with him. I just can't. The guys you have lower, I'd rather take the flyer on T.Y. Hilton and maybe Andrew Luck comes back and T.Y. Hilton's great again. Maybe Demaryius Thomas with Case Keenum and not just a dumpster fire at quarterback. And now he's healthy again. Could be really good. I'd rather take that chance. There's something with Amari Cooper, and they bring in Jordy Nelson, who's probably washed at this point. I have no faith in John Gruden. I don't think that Derek Carr is all that great. There's so many red flags for me with Amari Cooper. I just can't get behind him.
He's a type of guy that all through his fantasy career, someone's liked more than me in drafts, even where he always goes ahead of where I feel comfortable with taking him. I still think he'll get there. I mean, I still think when you look at last year, I mean, how he just played through the injury and he was awful. I mean, there's really no way around it. I mean, he was terrible, but I think that the Raiders put a lot in place around him that actually elevates him. You talk about a guy like Jordy Nelson and I think Martavis Bryant is the biggest piece here that elevates Amari Cooper, because it allows Amari Cooper not to just be that vertical player he was forced to be on the field with Seth Roberts and Michael Crabtree. That strictly boomer bust target guy. He was basically T.Y. Hilton. He's been T.Y. Hilton, with Oakland to start his career. But now with Martavis Bryant, when 3 wide receiver sets, Martavis Bryant can come on the field and be that lid lifter. Now we can move Amari Cooper around more, be more of the guy he was at Alabama. Be more of that underneath guy. You look at last year, the one game Amari Cooper went absolutely ham in, that game against the Chiefs, he got 10 targets in the slot in that game. He had 20 targets in the slot the whole rest of the season outside of that 1 week. Now we're able to move Amari Cooper around more. We can get him more efficient targets, more of this West Coast offense, these drags, these crossing routes under the field to get him the football in his hands. I don't think he'll ever still be a high touchdown guy, and he'll still carry some week-to-week volatility. But I think that a lot what the Raiders put in place this year, it sets him up to have a lot more success than he's had the last few years. And he's still just 24 years old with over 200 career receptions. Like, there's a lot that points to on his career trajectory, like, of him still being like a really good player, from here on out. Just last year he was one of those biggest letdowns. And I wasn't touching him as ADP last year. And he'll still probably be a guy where an owner in your league believes more in on the hype than I'm willing to draft him this year. But I don't hate him as much as, I have in years past, if he is able to slide through some of that recency bias. You touched on Hilton. Hilton's kind of just placed there right now as, stick and see what happens.
Yeah,
what happens to Andrew Luck.
We need to see. Let's say we get a glowing report on Andrew Luck. You see him pick up those kids, and all of a sudden he's chucking them 100 yards away. Poor kids, they got to go to the hospital. But you're like, hey, Andrew Luck, that arm looks back. What do you do with T.Y. Hilton then?
Yeah, I think he immediately, for me, is going to climb right back into that, like, the lower wide receiver 1 range. And anyone that's been drafting in best ball leagues at this point and has been getting Hilton in the 4th round is going to come away with, feeling really great about their outlook. I mean, you look at it, in the full seasons he's played with Andrew Luck, he's gone from the wide receiver 31 as a rookie to the wide receiver 18 to the wide receiver 12 to the wide receiver 5 in the full seasons he's played with Luck. I mean, he's just basically been contingent on, is Luck playing or not? I mean, he has been now higher than wide receiver 30 now in just 8 of 26 career games played without Andrew Luck. It's just one of those things. Is Luck playing? Because he's another one of these guys. We talked about these situations up at the top. Who do the Colts have to give targets to? It's going to be T.Y. Hilton. And if you get a quarterback upgrade involved, we've got a chance to have one of those big high ceiling seasons like he had his last season, the year that Luck played, the last full seasons Luck played. So, I mean, he would immediately jump up for me because are they giving Chester Rogers targets? I mean, where are these targets going? Darius Fountain. I mean, they've got Jack Doyle there, kind of a ho-hum player. They added Eric Ebron, but this wide receiver core is nothing. Like, the cupboard is bare, and he's going to be a guy. And this is a team we know is going to throw a lot too. It's not a team that's going to line up and run the football. They don't have a really great running back stable. They've improved the interior of their offensive line, but I mean, if Luck's healthy, Luck's going to be winging it, and if he's going to be winging it, he's going to be winging it to T.Y. Hilton mostly. So, I mean, there's a chance to have a big spike where you're able to grab him in drafts now to where you'll be able to grab him in drafts in August.
Tyreek Hill is dealing with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and the addition of Sammy Watkins into this core as well. Do you think that his just overall upside could be limited here, or is he the guy in this offense that he does what he does and he's going to score his points that way either time? He's going to be boom or bust. He might not have the same sort of floor that he was starting to develop last season because Watkins will be around, or for whatever reason, maybe they start throwing to Charkandrick West out of the backfield because the Chiefs love to do that. But it's a very, I get it. I get why he's there. It just, I'm too much of a coward to take him at this spot, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think I personally am as well. I mean, I was someone that wasn't really into him last year, and he went a long way last year proving himself as a wide receiver first, which was really important for his fantasy setup going forward over than being the way he was used that back half of his rookie season where he was more of like a Percy Harvin-esque type of player. I mean, last year he did nothing rushing or returning the football. It was all receiving. That's what floated him. I do worry a little bit, about his efficiency dip. I mean, he caught 71% of his targets last year from Alex Smith. I mean, where's that going to be with a guy like Patrick Mahomes? I mean, it could be a lot more volatile. It was nice to see that rise, though, because, like I said, he had a lot more traditional wide receiver targets. His average depth of target jumped almost 3 full yards last year. And he was able to turn that into, a big spike in yards per reception over a year ago. It wasn't just, like I said, he wasn't that Percy Harvin-esque type player. Where I worry about Hill coming into the 2018 season is he just has far less target volume than the players that are going around him. I mean, look at last year. He was just at 7 targets per game. That ranked 28th at the position a year ago. That was without Sammy Watkins, with them just having nothing outside of what they're going to have this year, outside of, Kelsey and Hunt. Now you add Watkins to that. Those 7 targets could easily turn to 6.5 or 6. And now we're getting rid of Alex Smith. Listen, no matter what you think about Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be really hard for him to have a year like Alex Smith had last year. So, I mean, now we're going to be losing probably a lot of, touchdown production. Efficiency gets baked into this loss of targets now. Now we're standing on some pretty shaky ground. Like you said, it's like, so am I willing to pull the trigger there? Probably not. I mean, that's kind of shaky. I mean, overall, I mean, he's a guy that can turn. You're drafting. He's one of those guys that can turn a really poor game into a good one. He's going to catch that 65-yard touchdown. All of his touchdowns last year were scored from 30 yards out or further. So, I mean, that's why you're drafting him. I think he's a guy that has a chance to be a lot better off in overall in the season ranks than he will be as like a week-to-week commodity for your roster.
So when you're drafting that type of player, does that mean you want to pair him up with one of the more consistent players, either as your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 3, and have that sort of boom guy that can win you a week in between? Or would you pair him up with almost 3 home run hitters like, hey, let's go get T.Y. Hilton, let's go get Allen Robinson, and then get Tyreek Hill, or potentially even Amari Cooper, and just say, you know what? If 2 of these guys have a great week, I'm going to win my week.
I mean, there's no proof that it matters in either direction. I personally, just from a team building aspect, do not like to stack those types of players. Like I think you've hinted on just you being the type of player as that as well. I'm someone that likes to play for volume first, and that play for that floor volume, and then get that, you know, those guys that are kind of boring players, but still have the upside. Those kind of guys we talked about. So, I mean, I'm a guy that would probably, you know, talking in terms of ADP, I'm probably a guy that's going to pass on Tyreek Hill and take a guy like Larry Fitzgerald. And if I'm going to take a guy like Tyreek Hill, I definitely want to pair him with someone I feel good about, like a Julian Edelman coming back around. So, I mean, that's just the way I like to build my teams. There is no actual proof that it matters, like week to week, but from just setting my lineup weekly, I like to know what I'm getting.
Well, you kind of hit on the name right there. Julian Edelman's next in the rankings. Then you have like Golden Tate in this area, Demariyus Thomas, Jarvis Landry. Obviously, Jarvis Landry going to Cleveland with what actually seems to be kind of a pretty good receiving core, shockingly enough for the Browns. I don't know if he's going to retain the same sort of target volume that he received over the years, but a lot of easy throws for Tyrod Taylor there. Edelman, Thomas, and Tate, though. I think I like Thomas a little bit, probably the best of that group, just based on that everyone just kind of down-talked him, and we've seen just this the past 3 years from him. Well, still producing quality fantasy numbers, but it just seems like there's no upside attached to him with him. I think that with even going back to the last Peyton Manning era, Peyton Manning was just a shell of his former self. Case Keenum could be good enough to be substantially the best quarterback they've had in Denver in some time, which could really help Demaryius Thomas. Edelman, I'm just in the dark on. Do we just assume he returns back to what he used to be?
I mean, they're missing 200 targets from Brandin Cooks and Amendola. The rest of their receiving core is largely a mystery. I find it hard to believe that Edelman won't just come back and walk into like a similar role, you know, if he's healthy. And by all accounts, he is. You know, he suffered that injury in the preseason last year. He's had over a full year to recover. So, I mean, I don't see how he just doesn't come and accrue like a large target share once again. I mean, he averaged 29%, 24%, and 26%, and then 25% of the targets per game his last 4 years played. He's probably one of the biggest, safest floor picks I think you can make. The downside, like we said, is when you look at this group, not a lot of touchdown production out of these guys. It's kind of why they're here. These guys have the volume of the guys ahead of them, but just don't have that, you know, the spiky touchdown weeks. These guys are going to turn a lot more like 6 for 60 weeks than they are going to save like those 40 and 60-yard games to touchdown, you know, and spike those up. Edelman's a guy, you know, he's had just one touchdown over 1 year with over 6 touchdowns played, that's playing along Tom Brady. But his floor is so good, man. He's had double-digit PPR points in 77% of his games played over his past 3 years. Only Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham have had that kind of floor that's higher. So, I mean, looking at the targets they lost and what kind of receiving core the Patriots have, we can't trust any of these guys behind Edelman. I mean, you've got Hogan, but Hogan's 30 and has never had more than 41 catches in a year. And then you got Jordan Matthews, Malcolm Mitchell, Kenny Britt. I mean, I just find it hard to not see a way where Edelman doesn't come into like a large volume, this season again.
You have Chris Hogan at number 26 in these rankings. Is that for touchdown upside, basically, and the big play potential he has in this offense?
Yeah, I think when you look at like how the tiers move down, we're moving down through the tiers, and we just talked about like a high PPR group of tiers, whereas then you're going to see like a high standard tier, like the guys that get a boost in standard leagues. They are guys that don't have a high volume of catches, but have that touchdown upside, that big play upside. You know, the guys that we talked about like Alshon. You know, you look at Alshon last year. I mean, he had the big touchdowns, but I mean, he's another guy that had, you know, career lows in receptions per game, yardage per game. he had a really low catch rate, even playing with an efficient Carson Wentz. There's room for that to come back and those to go up. But I mean, he's a guy that you're drafting more for like the upside now of the weekly touchdowns. He's a guy that could turn those games, like we said. He's a guy that can have those 3 for 50, but score a touchdown now with them instead of having 6 for 60. And that's Hogan's kind of in that group. I mean, Hogan, interestingly enough, he's only played 8 games with Edelman and Gronk on the field. So he's gonna be a tough guy to get a read on. I still think if you're talking about touchdown trickle down to be Gronk then Hogan through the passing game. So I mean, he's another guy I think that's gonna finish better in totality than he is gonna be a week to week commodity. I think it'll be the running backs and Edelman have the safe floor and PPRs. You've always got Gronk, and then it'll be Hogan kind of have spike weeks, down weeks where he has like those 2 to 4 catch games. And you're banking on him getting in the end zone. That's kind of where we're at, like with your guy, like Chris Hogan.
So let's talk about some teammates here. We just did Edelman and Hogan. Let's talk Golden Tate versus Marvin Jones. Obviously, Marvin Jones more likely to score more touchdowns than Golden Tate. Golden Tate, one of those 6 for 60 guys that you get every single week. In PPR last season, they finished number 12 and number 13 back-to-back in points per game. I think that if between the two, and I've been a Golden Tate ride or die guy for a very, very long time, but even with the exodus of Eric Ebron and maybe some of those red zone targets, maybe they go to Kenny Golladay. Who really knows? But I would feel that they would go to Marvin Jones before they would end up going to Golden Tate. That if they're going to be close anyway, I can see improvement for Marvin Jones here.
Yeah, where Jones concerns me is he's kind of had 2 years in a row now where he's just really gone on the wayside the back half of the year. He's kind of this guy that's just lived off these like big pockets of splash play production. I mean, you look at last year, he led the NFL in yards per reception, but at the front half of the year, he averaged 7.8 targets per game. The final 8 weeks of the season, he just had 5.6 targets per game, and just the catches weren't there for him. And he did that the year before, just on a more extreme level. He still scored 5 touchdowns the back half last year, but he only had the 28 catches over the final 8 weeks. We know Kenny Golladay is more of a direct threat to those vertical targets than he is to take anything away from Golden Tate. There's really nothing that is going to take away from what Golden Tate does in this offense. Michael Roberts, Luke Wilson, we're not really thinking those guys are threats. But Golladay is going to get more reps.
Well, here's the thing. What if Detroit says, hey, why do we have 17 running backs? Let's say they cut Theo Riddick. What do you think that would do to Golden Tate? How would you move Golden Tate, I wouldn't say significantly up, but could he crack the middle of the teens if Theo Riddick was no longer on the squad?
Maybe in totality as like ranks, but like tiers, he would still be in like a similar bucket where I'm drafting him first to be like a high volume reception based guy. So I mean, I would still kind of value him personally, similar, but like you could project more targets for him in that scenario. I think when you look at it as it lays out, like there's really no one is a threat to what Golden Tate has done, and Golden Tate's kind of been one of these ho-hum guys. Like you're not really in love with him. I mean, he scored just 19 touchdowns since he's been in Detroit for 4 years, but he's had 90 or more receptions in all 4 of those years. The only person to have 90 or more receptions in each of the past 4 years has been Antonio Brown. So, I mean, just kind of turn into this ho-hum producer, Golden Tate. Whereas, if Kenny Golladay somehow carves out a bigger role, it's more of a direct threat than it is to Jones. But I mean, like I said, I think Jones is fine. I think he belongs like in this group to be like that wide receiver too. He just is going to be one of these guys like an Alshon, like I said, or like a like Chris Hogan, going to have these games where you have a lot lower floor than you're willing to take on at that ADP. Of the players he goes around.
Well, in your rankings, in your tiered rankings, you just mentioned the 3 names that go along with Marvin Jones. The other one in that tier is Jordy Nelson, who you have ranked at number 29. I don't think he has anything left in the tank. There is no possible way you could sell me on Jordy Nelson this year. It can't happen. Like, I'd much rather have Martavis Bryant and roll the dice on that.
Yeah, I can get that. I mean, I just think when you look at his splits with and without Aaron Rodgers, like Brett Hundley, like that offense died outside of Davante Adams. Everyone died. He still averaged 11.7 yards per catch, with Aaron Rodgers. So I mean, there was still something there. He scored all 6 of his touchdowns with Rodgers. If you're asking if I think Nelson can be a proxy of what Michael Crabtree is giving the Raiders, I still think that's still probable. He can be one of those guys that give you that 11 to 12 yards per reception, catch 75 to 80 passes and score 6 to 8 touchdowns. But there is by far a lot of Jordy Nelson. I will say, I do agree with you. A lot of this framework for Jordy Nelson feels very similar to how we tried to frame Brandon Marshall's dip in the year prior, his age 32 season, where he had this horrendous quarterback play, and we kind of were like, well, we kind of started making excuses for him. There is a lot of that here as well. So I don't have any pushback for people that just want to push him off the board completely.
Well, it's funny because you have Michael Crabtree right below him at number 30, and I was talking about potential target monsters this season. That could be Michael Crabtree in Baltimore. Gun to my head, I know the value is way off on them, so you wouldn't necessarily need to do this in a draft. But I think I'd rather own Crabtree over Amari Cooper, again, for the fourth straight year.
Yeah, judging by the type of player you laid yourself out at, why not wait the extra picks? Crabtree's even going even later this year, basically because he's another one of these guys coming off of just, career worst. His targets, reception, his catch rate and yardage per game were all lows that he had in Oakland. Now he's trading a worse, situation, even if we're going to roll over the targets. Oakland to Baltimore is a pretty bad situation. Joe Flacco's just the guy that hasn't, aided these wide receivers to be higher than wide receiver 20, 24-ish guys. So Crabtree's season's probably being his ceiling is probably a low wide receiver 2 this year. And we know the touchdowns probably aren't going to roll over either, where he was kind of a guy that would still get you those 8 touchdowns with the Raiders. Flacco hasn't had a wide receiver score more than 6 touchdowns since Torrey Smith in 2014. So, kind of like I said, volume-driven PPR guy is how I view Crabtree this year over a more of a touchdown. He probably would have been the tier above, based on years prior, that more volatile touchdown-induced guy than he was in Oakland and Baltimore.
But isn't Michael Crabtree substantially better than any of the receivers that Joe Flacco's had over the past 5 years? He got an end of the career Baldwin. He got an end of the career Steve Smith. Torrey Smith is nice, but he's not great by any means.
Neither is Crabtree. When you look at him, if you look at what he's done per game, even in Oakland, and the type of receiver, what he does per target, he's just touchdowns have kind of masked how good he's been. And if we think the touchdowns are going to go down and he's not really going to improve as a player, we're really just counting on volume there, and which could have some value. But if you look at Crabtree, Crabtree really hasn't been good either. He's not really I wouldn't qualify Crabtree as a good receiver. You look at everything that he's done. It's nothing about his catch rate, yards per target, yards per reception. Nothing jumps out to you. He's just the guy that's gotten 145 targets a year. So if he's going to get 140 targets but lose a few touchdowns, we're kind of the same.
But the thing is, I can see the targets going way up this season. He's one of these people that I think they can flirt with a 30% market share in that offense. Who else are they throwing to? Willie Snead? He'll be busted for steroids 3 games into the season.
Yeah, Hayden Hurst. No, I think that's the argument you build for Crabtree is based around, him having a high target market share. And then if anything were to improve, you're along for that ride. I have no, really pushback on Crabtree and its ADP. I'm for it. Like you said, I like those boring guys that are getting a lot of targets. So I really don't have any pushback for you. I don't think that Crabtree's an entity where I'm just he's as good. He's so good that if you just give him a bunch of targets, he's going to turn him into something really, really good. I'm not sure that's the case because he was a guy that was getting 145 targets.
He also had Derek Carr. And let's not. I don't think the gap between Derek Carr and Joe Flacco is all that pronounced. To tell you the truth, at least Flacco will throw it down the field. Potentially.
He's another one of those Bortles downfield chuckers, though. He's throwing it downfield to grass or the sideline.
You have Jarvis Landry over Josh Gordon, and this seems kind of hot takey. I'm not going to lie to you. Based on where Josh Gordon is going, the buzz around Josh Gordon, I'm not inclined to disagree with you on this one either. I love myself some Josh Gordon, but right now, Josh Gordon is the 15th receiver coming off draft boards, where
pretty aggressive.
Jarvis Landry is 22nd, and you have them at number 24, number 25. Are people just enamored with the upside that could come along with Josh Gordon and kind of overlooking the safety of Jarvis Landry?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about players that are going to be able to roll over what they've done through their careers, Josh Gordon's a lot more risk than Jarvis Landry is, because Josh Gordon had his gigantic spike year on just an insane target value and splash plays. And last year when he came in, he had 26.4% of the Cleveland passing targets. That's definitely not going to happen again. And then when the Browns are basically telling you and me that they also value Jarvis Landry more than they value Josh Gordon. One, they traded for him with the franchise tag, knowing they're going to have to pay him a top salary. Then immediately gave him a contract extension to be one of the top paid wide receivers in the league. So, I mean, I am just going to read the tea leaves that they believe more in Jarvis Landry than they're willing to put stock in their franchise than Josh Gordon at this point. I think that the target volume will be higher for Landry, although Landry comes with risk now, whereas Landry would have been, one of those guys we would have talked about, being one of those guys that's going to have 150, 160 targets. We're just going to have to get on board with that. He's also at risk because he's a guy that has been 26% target market share overreach the past 3 years. Now he's playing alongside of a receiving core, like you joked about it, but has been far better than anything he's been a part of at this point in his career. When you have Josh Gordon, a Duke Johnson out of the backfield, what we get from David Njoku, what we get from Corey Coleman, that's a lot better than anything Jarvis Landry has had to compete with at this point in his career. So he's a guy I think will fall down into like that 120 target, 120, 125 target total range. And Josh Gordon will be that guy that's around like that 100 target total range. I think just Josh Gordon's ADP is really aggressive for me. I mean, this is a guy that, has yet to give us a full NFL season period. We just don't really know what we're going to get. I mean, we're kind of just chasing the ghost of that, that big season from him. And he was good last year, but like he still off of 26% of a share of the targets was just an all right fantasy producer. So, I mean, kind of still volatile. So it's really tough to say. The quarterback situation is better there, but I mean, I definitely at ADP want Landry over Gordon, and Gordon's just a guy I'm probably not going to have in a lot of leagues, period, because someone's just going to like him a lot more than I do based on his initial ADP right now. I don't really see how it goes significantly further down, over the course of the summer.
Well, if you really want to take a shot on one of these upside guys, and I think that people view Josh Gordon as being almost a season breaker, that if you do hit and he hits, you win. And I kind of feel the same way about JuJu. And JuJu you have at number 23, you're getting a significant discount in terms of draft capital, whereas Josh Gordon is being drafted as the 15th receiver at the moment. JuJu is still going in the 5th round, number 24 receiver off the board. I think that's a spot you'd want to gamble on that type of receiver.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. Gordon's going – the problem with Gordon is I actually support his upside. It's just where his ADP is. It's where he goes and drafts is what bothers me. And I'm not getting that bite of the apple around players that go around him. I just like other players more that go around him, where you said like JuJu kind of falls into an area where you could take on, some more of that upside. And if he doesn't make the jump and is more of the player he was last year, you're still okay. And especially when you look at JuJu splits when just one of those Steelers guys was out of the lineup last year. I mean, he had 33% of the targets in the one game that Martavius Bryant missed, and he turned that into 7 for 193 and a touchdown. You look at the 2 games that Antonio Brown missed, he had a 24% target market share and a 37% target market share. He had 6 for 75 and a touchdown, 9 for 143 and a touchdown in those games. We got rid of Martavius Bryant. They did directly draft a Martavius Bryant like replacement in James Washington. Like he can come in and fill like a similar – he could do the things that Martavius Bryant was doing in that offense, occupy those types of targets. But we should expect Smith-Schuster's target, volume to build off of last year. It is kind of interesting that like his best games came with one of those guys out of the lineup. Kind of makes it a little more in that gray area of like what is real and what isn't. Because he had just a 13% target market share when everyone was healthy in that lineup. We know Lev's going to occupy his share of targets as well. But, I mean, when you look at him just being 21, he had the 7th highest scoring season ever for a wide receiver at age 21. All of those guys came back and scored more points the year after that, except for Keenan Allen, who got injured. So, I mean, he's one of those guys, like, if you're going to bet on, you bet on that archetype, a guy 21 coming in and setting it on fire and being on one of the best offenses in the NFL. That's what you want to bet on. And then if something were to happen to Antonio Brown, you're going to walk into just like an enormous amount of value.
You have Brandin Cooks at number 28. You have Robert Woods at number 32. And Cooper Kupp comes in at, where was Cooper Kupp? I saw him on this list, and then he went away. He's somewhere else. We'll say he's down in the 40s somewhere. Anyway, I do think that Robert Woods has a potential to be a lot better than Brandin Cooks, solely because I feel like Brandin Cooks is going to generate that, and listen, the Rams play a tough deal, like quarterback one schedule. And we saw it happen to Sammy Watkins last year, and it opened up everything for Kupp. and Robert Woods. Robert Woods with the consistency. We saw Cooper Kupp with some consistency, but a lot of red zone work that was frankly quite stunning. And if you think that Gurley takes a little bit of a step back and doesn't run every single carry he gets inside the 10 into the end zone, maybe Kupp can challenge that. Maybe Robert Woods can challenge it. But I feel like Brandin Cooks could be set up to disappoint here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Brandin Cooks is another guy that just goes over where I'm willing to pay for him. And you kind of hit upon like that wide receiver 1 schedule. That was going to be Robert Woods' schedule. Now it's going to be Brandin Cooks' schedule. So that definitely makes Woods a more intriguing play, especially when you factor in cost. I mean, they've got Patrick Peterson twice, Richard Sherman twice, who's off an Achilles. So, I mean, if you don't want to count that, they've got Darius Slay, Casey Hayward, Xavier Rhodes, Marshawn Lattimore. Those guys are also on the schedule as well. That kind of bodes well for, a guy like Robert Woods getting funneled some targets. Cooks is one of those guys, I think, it'll say, we'll look back on it, Cooks might finish higher than Woods, but Woods would be the guy you prefer to own. It's kind of been a theme of so far our show. Maybe it's because me and you kind of sync up that way and what we look for in wide receiver play. But Woods made that just gigantic jump last year. He had 23% of the targets per game when he was active. And that doesn't even include that big monster playoff game he had, against the Falcons. He had 9 for 142 in that playoff game. He had a really high ceiling. He was a top 20 scoring receiver in 4 of his final 7 games played. Those are all things you like if the targets are going to get drawn away from him. Kupp is one of those guys that I look at. It's just he's one of those guys that he just wasn't good until a guy was out of the lineup last year. He was just kind of he really didn't do anything. He just kind of lived off touchdown production. And I think we have to anticipate the Rams are going to score fewer offensive touchdowns this year, based on the kind of efficiency they had last year, just natural regression. And he had a lot of in red zone targets Kupp did, but a lot of them were from the 11 to 20 and not inside the 10. He had a high percentage of red zone targets to occupy his targets, but they weren't near the goal line as much as you think. And then Cooks is just, no matter how you want to cut this for Cooks, it's a downgrade because he's going from a team that was, 16th in passing rate last year to 26th in passing plays run this year. I mean, how much higher is that going to go for the Rams? How much more passing volume are the Rams going to have? I mean, we know the defense got significantly better. The running game is still going to be a large part of what they want to do. So, I mean, where does the passing volume go? And Cooks, if he's going to roll over even a lateral share of targets that he had from New England, those are going to go down. I mean, if you were to say his 140 targets last year, they would have just been, if you were to roll over the exact same target market share, they would have just been 99 on the Rams last year. So if you give a guy like Cooks, 99 targets instead of 100 and not 120 like he was getting, in the Saints thing, the helium starts to just slowly leak for Brandin Cooks year to year. And that's kind of what we've done. He slowly just started to reduce a little bit every year. And that's kind of what I think we're going to have happen again. I think he will be better than Sammy Watkins. If we're just trying to draw a parallel of Cooks to Watkins and how he'll be a fantasy commodity, I think he'll be better coming in with the full offseason, get acclimated. Watkins, remember, was traded right at the end of the preseason. We were excited for Watkins because remember the preseason, they came out and just threw to him every play. They just threw him every play in the preseason. We were like, this is what we're getting. This would be great. And then they traded him, and we have just our hearts all broke. Yeah, Cook's one of those guys. Like I said, it's just going to be another step down, I think, for him this year.
Corey Davis is currently going inside the top 30. It looks like he's the guy now in Tennessee. Although they signed Dion Lewis, they still have Marcus Mariota, who's going to be mobile out of the backfield. Derrick Henry is going to pound. It just seems like a team that wants to run the ball a lot, or just kind of flick it to Delaney Walker whenever they have the chance. I feel like Corey Davis is going to get more and more and more and more hype as we get closer to the season. People are going to really make these cases about how he could be a top 10 guy this year. And hey, maybe he can, although I feel like that's very low on the range of outcomes. He feels more like bust than boom to me.
He's another guy not drafted in his ADP. I'd much rather have his teammate Rishard Matthews at cost than I would him. A guy that has shown actual touchdown upside. And Rishard Matthews is just a criminally underrated player. Based on the type of efficiency he's provided week to week for his career. I mean, a lot of people just don't really want him. I mean, he goes in the wide receiver 50 range almost every draft. I mean, I'm totally fine to take him on. His target share is not really a threat. He'll be able to have what he had last year. But back to Corey Davis, I mean, it just feels wishful thinking to me. The offense should be a little better because you're getting rid of Mike Larkin and Terry Robisky for that that Matt LaFleur, a guy who came from, this Rams offense that we just moved off of that kind of worked under Sean McVay. Going to run a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. But to me, that just creates more advantage for the run game. Like the guys like Deion Lewis, Derrick Henry, they run a lot out of those sets. We're not really worried about, a guy like Taywan Taylor, type of getting more usage in the wide receiver grouping here, but they've got a guy like Delaney Walker, who's going to be a problem for Corey Davis. And I already touched on Rishard Matthews being a problem. I just don't know where the real big upside is. It's not a team that's going to have a big, significant jump in passing volume where they're going to throw 600 passes and be able to spread it around all these guys. So Corey Davis, for me, I'm with you. He's just one of these guys. I think like his ceiling is probably going to be more of a lower range wide receiver 2. His probability is going to be probably more of like a wide receiver 3 that kind of just doesn't have the touchdown upside of some of those guys you would like. Because I think when you get in there, it's going to be Walker, it's going to be Rishard Matthews, it's going to be a guy like Derrick Henry in the red zone. So I mean, he's a guy I'm not really looking, to really grab onto either.
Teammates, Devante Parker, you have at number 27. Kenny Stills, the Stills to pay the bills, number 40. I think I'd rather have Stills. I can't do this with Devante Parker again. He just breaks my heart every single year.
I like both these guys. I mean, I like stacking them in best ball drafts too, because we know that Tannehill's not going to be a guy that supports like week to week 2 wide receivers that are fantasy relevant. I think these guys will interchange their good weeks a lot throughout the season, so I don't mind stacking them because they're both really cheap. I think they're both undervalued right now. I get the thing. I get it with Devante Parker, but I mean, look at Devante Parker. We go under the hood of Devante Parker. I think he's been a little better than people give him credit for. I think the expectations have just been too high. His targets, receptions, and receiving yardage have all improved every year. He was a lot better than I think anyone realizes he was for fantasy last year. He was a wide receiver 33 or higher in 8 of the 10 games in which he had just 4 targets in. And that was just with having 1 touchdown on the season. So, I mean, you're getting him at like wide receiver 40 now in ADP. That's a lot of room to squeeze, even if he just is that same wide receiver 3 player. If your expectations are drafting as a bench, swing player, like you're going to be fine. And he could be a starter for you. Because like I said, he already was a wide receiver 3 or better. In 8 of those 10 starts, he just got 4 targets. Now we take 160 targets from Jarvis Landry away. Those targets are going to go up. He also was a lot better player with Ryan Tannehill in the lineup. I mean, going back to that 2016 season, which kind of initiated some of this hype at back end of the year. I mean, he caught 66% of his targets from Tannehill. There's a lot of room to get off. I understand that, he's kind of hurt some people that had higher expectations for him. They don't want to draft him. But, I mean, he looks like a value this year again, based on ADP. I get it. You don't want to draft those guys because he's been scorned. And then Stills is one of those guys that we kind of call Rishard Matthews is just kind of underrated. Just overall underrated.
All right.
I mean, for the third year in a row in Miami, his opportunity rose, his efficiency rose, his receptions and receiving yardage rose, and his fantasy points per game all rose. So we're removing those Landry targets we talked about. And also, Gase has been a guy that's used Stills a little more creatively than I think people realize. He's kind of thought of as like this boundary vertical guy. But his slot use has risen every year under Adam Gase. He was a guy, before Gase got there, in New Orleans, it was 16%, 18%. His first year in Miami was 21% routes run from the slot. Stills ran 41% of his routes from the slot in 2016, 47% last year. He leads all NFL receivers in touchdowns from the slot over the past years, something a lot of people probably wouldn't equate to him. A lot of people just equate the slot to these, intermediate targets, but they're getting him free releases from the slot. I don't expect like his deployment to really be that different with Jarvis Landry gone. Like he's not going to be this guy that just turns and get all these like high efficiency near the line of scrimmage targets, but he's going to still be used in the slot often enough, probably around 50% because it was 40% last year, jumping from 41%. And we know the touchdown upside has been there for a guy like Kenny Stills. He's still just 26 years old too. I don't think people realize that because he's kind of been around for all these years. But I like him a lot too. I mean, even if he's not the archetype of player you like, the boomer bust, type of guy, I mean, you're drafting as a bench receiver at that point and on your roster to where you're not obligated to play him every week. And even though those weeks might be a little more harder to predict than they have been in the past, I think that that'll get smoothed out this year by the target increase that we're projecting.
All right, very quickly, two guys that you have very low in your rankings compared to where I kind of perceive them. And one is Robby Anderson. He's number 45. Don't really know what's going to happen with his situation, whether he ends up getting suspended. Doesn't look like that's going to happen at this point, but who knows? But if Josh McCown's starting, I think that he's a top 30-ish receiver. And I was shocked to see Devin Funchess at number 46, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, yeah, they got DJ Moore, but I don't see how his role changes all that much from last season.
Yeah, Anderson's one of those like stick opinion guys for me too now, where we talk about Hilton. Like, I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens with him, where all this goes. I mean, he still can be suspended by the league if they so choose. The other thing is, like, he was really reliant on McCown playing. So, I mean, if you look at his splits when McCown came out the field, like, he just died with Bryce Petty. And that could be more Bryce Petty than it could be switching to a guy like Sam Darnold. But Darnold is also a complete unknown, so we won't know. So how many games do we get from McCown? He's also another guy that you get a Nunwa back. The target share should get shedded a little bit. But, I mean, I'm with you. I'm probably too low on him at this point. Funchess is really hard for me because he was not really fantasy relevant until Kelvin Benjamin got traded, and that was also with Greg Olsen out. And then when Greg Olsen also returned, he once again became not fantasy relevant. He kind of was just good through that gap of not having Kelvin Benjamin and not having Greg Olsen. So how do we really project Funchess? He had more than just 4 receptions in 2 games when Kelvin Benjamin played, and then he had just more than 4 receptions in a game, just one of the games Olsen played. So now we're talking about a touchdown-dependent player on a team that's not going to have a lot of value. I mean, the most pass attempts Cam Newton's had in years, 516. The Panthers are probably going to have play reduction because Norv Turner actually has run significantly slower-paced offenses than Mike Shula. Which is sad to say. Then you get Olsen back. We take a receiver in the first round. We still got, Christian McCaffrey that's going to occupy a moderate of target share for a running back. So now where all these things fit in for Devin Funchess. Now on the flip side of this, Funchess is only 24 years old. He is in a land of Smurfs. He's still the red zone guy there. So is it a jumping off point to where he just was able to build off of what he did last year, or does he fall back into how he was used? So he's kind of really a tough guy for me. I've drafted him some in best balls because of, on the chance I don't have any confidence that I'm fully right on the Funchess situation. So in case I'm wrong, I want to have these pieces of Funchess, but I also am very concerned that he's not really anything more than a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type. Because he doesn't really do anything like tremendously special either.
Without Dez Bryant and now potentially without Terrence Williams, someone in Dallas has to be fantasy relevant. Is it Allen Hurns?
Maybe. I mean, do we know? Do we know? I mean, no Jason Witten either. I mean, what's going to happen with this Cowboys unit? Is it going to be where they just spread all these guys around and all these guys are good just for pockets of the season? Like, is Beasley going to be good to start the year because he's got a rapport built in with Dak? Then, like, Hurns is good because he's the guy that's actually shown a little bit of, like, a downfield and touchdown ceiling? Or is it going to be Michael Gallup, like, develops a role in the middle of the season and takes over and, like, is the guy the back half of the year? I really couldn't tell you, man. Like, there are some smart people in the world, and if someone tells you they know which Dallas receiver is going to be the guy, I want to buy some land off of those guys. I don't want to buy some land off those guys because I don't think anyone really knows. It's up in the air. I don't have a good feel for it. And anyone that tells you they have a good feel for it, I think that they're just guessing as well.
Well, it's one of these things where, like, Allen Hurns is being drafted at wide receiver number 50 right now. Gallup
totally cool with that. Totally cool with drafting all these guys, by the way.
Gallup is 66. Cole Beasley's not even being drafted. Like, eventually someone has to catch the ball in Dallas, so they're going to be the worst team in the history of football. So I guess I would burn it right now on Allen Hurns if I was drafting today, just because he's a known commodity. But we have seen Cole Beasley be able to, maybe he can eke out like a Julian Edelman type season finally on a consistent basis, just because there's literally no one else around.
Yeah, I mean, his splits without Dez Bryant the year prior were very good. I mean, Beasley was one of the big consistent commodities. I mean, so universally might be just too low on him, at this point of the summer, and he might be a guy that, as this moves on and more analysis is done, climbs the ranks and gets, moves into that, area of safe floor PPR type guys at that point in the draft, like that secondary group of those guys.
Any receivers that we didn't talk about that you want to highlight, either that you really like, that are a bit down on the board, or some that you hate and you're just like, never with these guys again. I hate Marquise Goodwin. I'm never going to play him.
Well, I mean, a couple of guys. If you look at my ranks compared to ADP, I will say that like I'm higher on Randall Cobb, especially adding him on teams. I understand that Cobb's kind of been one of these guys like he's going to rebound, and hasn't yet. And that 2014 season he had kind of feels like that's the outlier of his career. I don't expect him to ever be that type of player again. But I think when you look at what he did last year with Rodgers in the lineup, he was good. I mean, he quietly had 30 catches for 302 yards and 2 touchdowns on 45 targets in those games. And he was the wide receiver 27 or higher in 4 of those 5 games that Rodgers played fully with Cobb. So, I mean, he's another guy that goes like wide receiver 45, wide receiver 50. And you lose Jordy. They replaced Jordy with Graham. Graham was really an ineffective player outside of the red zone last year. So what can we count on Graham efficiency-wise between the 20s? So, I mean, I'm a little higher on Cobb. I like him where he's priced a lot. I think he's going to be like a lower wide receiver 3 in totality. I like getting him as a bench player. I mean, you're getting a bench player in your roster attached to Aaron Rodgers, and I understand that argument could be made for Cobb's past 3 years. But the volume is there, and when he played with Rodgers last year, he was a lot more effective than it looked like his season was when you just look back at if you owned him and he was on waivers, after Hundley, came in and took over rosters. But there's some upside there as well. Like I said, you like Demaryius Thomas. I probably like Emmanuel Sanders based on cost more than Demaryius Thomas. Kind of we run that game. So like, Sanders is one of those guys that just dips in drafts now too. I mean, but there's the target share in Denver is probably going to run through those 2 guys again. He's just significantly cheaper. He's had more upside than Demaryius Thomas. That's probably why his ADP is where it is. But he's also his ADP is the point where I'm willing to take on more upside because I've drafted more of those consistent types that we've talked about throughout the drafts. He has as many wide receiver 1 fantasy weeks as Demaryius Thomas, over the past 3 seasons. That despite playing 5 fewer games. Case Keenum's also going to be good for him. Also, Cortland Sutton's going to be good for him, depending how this shakes out. If Cortland Sutton earns reps ahead of, Deshaun Hamilton and, Carlos Henderson, that means Emmanuel Sanders is going to be the guy that's going to be moving in the slot and getting this boost in efficiency, targets. So, I mean, I like Emmanuel Sanders where he goes. Those kind of older guys that are just discounted, or the guys that just where narrative streets run too far, like we talked about the Stills, even like I said, Devante Parker, I get he's scoring you. You can't just inject those types of things when you look at those types of players and where they're priced this year. You have to, see the value, understand that you're not drafting these guys to be starters in the first place, and take on, some of this. If they are those 2 players, you really didn't bite off more than you could chew on those types of guys.
Final player. We mentioned the 2 other Dolphins receivers, but is there a chance that Albert Wilson just steps into the Jarvis Landry role?
I would have been high on it if they wouldn't have won out of Danny Amendola. And Danny Amendola is actually, the way they structured the contract is he's making more money right away than Albert Wilson is, even though Albert Wilson got kind of a contract that we all kind of blinked at. And then they added Mike Gesicki too, who really isn't much of a blocker and is just like a pure receiver. So you're talking about, I think they're going to use those 3 players to kind of match what Jarvis Landry did. So instead of Jarvis Landry's role kind of going over to one player, it's going to be just like a hybrid of those guys. But I mean, yeah, if there was one guy to step out, I mean, we can't count on Amendola staying healthy or anything, or really getting a lot of reps. If one guy was to break out of that situation, I would be more inclined to bet on Wilson than I would be Amendola or Gesicki.
Rich Hribar, you can check out his work up on rotoworld.com, but you probably already knew that, and his tiered rankings at receiver you can find on his Twitter at Lord Reeves. What do you guys have planned for the Roto World Draft Kit?
Yeah, so the draft kit, it's been the number 1 selling draft guide, I think each of the past 2 years. So, I mean, I do the projections in there. I do the tiers. I do AFC wide receiver profiles. I mean, we've got, all the big hitters that you love. I mean, everyone loves Evan, big Papa Pump. I mean, that's why they're buying a magazine. Everyone wants to know what Evan's right, and they don't care what I got to say. But, we've got Pat Doherty, who's great. Ray Summerlin, who's ranked high in the Fantasy Pros, rankings, in each of the past few years. Nick Mencio, Jesse. I can't pronounce Jesse's last name. I'm not gonna try it. Sorry, Jesse. I apologize. But yeah, so I mean, just keep buying that NBC Roto World product, man. I mean, my name's attached to it. Evans is attached to it. Why not go for it?
All right, dude. Thanks for being on the line.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm glad we finally got to do this. I've been looking forward to catching up with you.
Well, maybe we'll have to do it again sometime soon as the season approaches. Maybe after the draft guide's out, so you can just tell me what people are saying, being like, I hate this rank of X guy.
When all these rankings are completely different.
Oh yeah, of course. That's why you do it now. We get 2 shows out of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, those are the early rankings. You can check out the running back rankings, the upcoming quarterback rankings, not mine, all my guest rankings. My rankings will come out sometime around July 1st, maybe July 7th, depending on when I can get all this stuff filmed. And I really deep dive into the football season. But thank you for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. Follow me at the PME on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Plus, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience podcast, wherever you can download, podcast, rate, review, give the episode a like on YouTube, and that's it. I'm Pat Mayo. Enjoy prepping for fantasy football season. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!